somebody told me about this article from the CBC, and it just sounded too good to be true. April 10th, 2022. So it's an old article, but from what I hear, it's a pretty funny one. Can owning a dog be a selfish pursuit? This academic thinks so. So let's not prejudge. Let's just read it and see what she has to say. People want animals in their lives as accessories, argues PhD student Molly Lebensky. Okay. So let's read this article. I think it might be interesting. I think it might be very dumb. But we can just discuss like this. Because I love literature, and apparently this article has a lot to do with literature. I am an English major myself. I've read many books. I have a friend who took an animals in literature course in university, which he said was really fascinating. But yeah, we'll see. PhD student Molly Lebensky is about 1 million Canadians who became a pet owner during the pandemic. While finishing her dissertation examining the portrayal of dogs in American fiction, she rescued a 2-year-old Australian Shepherd named Duncan. Oh, that's so cute! Aw, Duncan. Baby Duncan. Digging into the stories of dogs in American literature led Molly Lebensky to realize a disconnect in our relationship to canines. I think over the last few decades, we've developed a bit more of an entitlement when it comes to our relationships with dogs, says Lebensky, who is finishing her PhD in English at University in Kingston. Okay, so that's not terrible, right? I think that's like a... Oh yeah, it's bird time, baby. Speaking of pets, ugh, love them. Love these crazy kids. So I don't think I disagree with her initial statement here, the initial quote. I do think that people feel entitlement to like pets. But I don't know that it's like as bad as all that. You know what I mean? I think, and I don't know that it's like, I don't know. I've never owned a pet. I've never owned a dog, but maybe you guys can talk about it. I mean, there are definitely some bad pet owners and people who own pets for aesthetic reasons rather than wanting to actually care for an animal, but we'll see. That's not really what I want to talk about, though. I hate those who have pets and just straight up ignore them. Oh yeah, for sure, because it's a aesthetic thing for them. I don't want to psychoanalyze, but I'm about to. Her deep dive into classics like Old Yeller, the story of a devoted dog who saves his human family on numerous occasions, but gets a bullet in the head after contracting rabies, reveals a pattern in literature where dogs are discarded once their usefulness to humans subsides? What? She says this attitude reflects our real-world relationship to dogs and other animals, arguing that people want them in their lives as accessories that can be easily discarded. Okay, so like, I don't disagree necessarily with her prescriptions for the real world, but I think the assumption that Old Yeller has something to do with that is frankly ludicrous. Old Yeller is the story of a family who, yeah, loves this dog because it saves them. Like, it's a very devoted dog. They love the dog. But like, he's put down because he contracts rabies, not because he's discarded, not because his usefulness has subsided. If a dog has rabies, yeah, I mean, they were like pilgrims or whatever. They couldn't really do anything else about it. The dog was suffering. Like, this is why I wanted to talk about this article, because, like, Old Yeller is not the story of a dog who is discarded and killed because its usefulness runs out. It's the story of a dog who is heroic, loyal, and loved, and then the son of the family. Like, that's the whole, like, ending scene, right? Like, the whole reason the kid says, you know, like, He's my dog, Pa. I'll do it. Because he loves the dog. Because the dog is, like, has rabies, and he doesn't want him to, like, suffer. Like, that's... Is that a bad thing? Is it a bad thing to put down dogs that are suffering? I don't know. Lebensky points to the high demand for so-called designer dog breeds, while thousands of dogs in shelters need good homes as a clear example of that. These designer dogs include mixed breeds such as golden doodles, half golden retriever and half poodle, and cockapoos, cocker spaniels slash poodle, which are favored because they don't shed as much, or pomskis, husky Pomeranians, which are convenient for people who want smaller dogs. It's at the point where we've got designer dogs customized so they can come in any color, any pattern, any size. The word design is perfect. You can design a dog in a way that really reduces them to more of a commodity than it does a companion. Okay, let's just keep reading. According to statistics from the American Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and the Canadian Humane Society, in 2019, nearly 400,000 shelter dogs were euthanized across America. If we really love dogs, we would be trying to help ones that already exist rather than creating ones for our weirdly specific needs, said Lebensky, who adopted an Australian Shepherd shelter dog during the pandemic. I think pet keeping has become largely a selfish pursuit. We get dogs specifically for personal reasons that don't really benefit the dogs, whether it's to assuage our own loneliness, or if you want to get more exercise, then getting a dog is the way to make that happen. Couples often get dogs to sort of test the waters before they have children. I mean... Okay, so, like, there is an issue. Breeding to begin with was a little weird and morally ambiguous. Yeah, I think it's definitely morally ambiguous. Like, the idea of... I mean, to be fair, I do see her point here. Like, the idea of breeding a dog for your own specific needs is kind of weird and it morally iffy. I don't want anything that sheds in my life, but then I just don't get a dog then. You know what I mean? Like, if I wanted a dog that didn't shed, then I just wouldn't get a dog. It's kind of as easy as that, in my opinion. The whole idea of breeding a dog specifically for your needs is kind of weird. You can usually find the dog that fits, or just don't get one. I don't know. Although I think she is being maybe a little bit alarmist with the idea of pet keeping has become largely a selfish pursuit. This line, we get dogs specifically for personal reasons that don't really benefit the dogs. I mean, you can say that about kids, though. Lots of people have kids for personal reasons. There are so many times that I've heard where people are like, oh, I want a kid. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, well, kids are so cute. They're so this, they're so that. And it's like, okay, but like, these aren't reasons. And I'm not saying that that's right either. I don't want kids, specifically because I don't have a reason to have any. I don't have any personal reasons to want them, and I don't have any, like, altruistic, pragmatic reasons to want them. Same reason I don't like pets. I'm agreeing with her a lot more than I thought I would, because I was expecting more of the article to be taken up by, like, the Old Yeller deep dive, which I think is a stupid take, if I'm being completely honest. Everything else she's saying is pretty unobjectionable. It's just this, like, literature take that really is a little bit alarmist and brain dead for me. Pets of all kinds have been in high demand during the pandemic. According to research conducted by Abacus Data, about 900,000 more Canadians became new pet owners during the pandemic. Some animal shelters have noted an increase in pets being given up. We get at least 5 to 10 surrender applications a day. We can't even keep up with the surrender. That sucks. I will say, I don't like that. I think the same way loneliness is not enough of a reason to get a pet, I don't like people who want kids because they want to leave behind a legacy, or oh, who's gonna take care of me when I'm older. Like, that's unhinged in my opinion. And I feel like the same is about for animals, where like loneliness is not really an excuse. Every year, Dogtails is able to find adoptive homes for about 350 surrendered and rescued dogs, but for Ferrante, who now manages a kettle, dealing with the surrender request is difficult. It's the least favorite part of my job, I would say, because I can't relate to people who are surrendering their dogs. I can't understand how someone can just dispose of their dog, no matter how hard it is, if you're moving or whatever. I don't know. I think sometimes people just get in tough situations and they don't want to deal with the stress of having a dog. I don't think it always is the case. I think most of the time it's just people who got pets without really understanding the work that it takes to take care of them and how much of their life will be taken up by it. But I don't know how I can realistically fault someone for, say, maybe they're making a big move and they just can't make space in their life anymore. I don't know. I feel like this is a more nuanced topic. Okay, so this is the part of the article that I really want to talk about. The dogs in literature conversation. Because again, English major, hi. For her PhD work, Lubensky combed through canonical works of American fiction in which dogs are discarded, killed, or left for dead. She's identified troubling dog scenes in classics such as Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, and Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Okay, so I've read To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't remember the dog scene, and I haven't read the other two. Should I read some Toni Morrison? I feel like I should read Toni Morrison. The working title of Lubensky's thesis is Who Let the Dogs Die? That's good. That's good. Domestic animal abuse in American fiction. For me, the dog characters in literature are just as important as the human ones, said Lubensky. I think we have this great relationship with animals, but the reality of the fiction shows us otherwise. The dog is really often ignored as an individual in itself in literature. Lubensky draws on a framework known as animal standpoint theory, which aspires to analyze the literature from the animal's perspective. Okay, there is something to be said about dogs in literature at being POV characters. I think that can be like a fun experiment. I think this is a little over dramatic, because I don't think there's anything wrong with animals being used symbolically in literature. I think it can be an issue if people take it to like an extreme, but I don't think the idea of like, oh, this bird is a symbol of the main character's innocence and it like dies at some point in the narrative, I don't really see that as like a huge problem. I think that's just how writing works. And there are plenty of novels where like people are used symbolically as well. Like Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind has a character who's almost purely symbolic. Like, what's her name? So Melanie Wilkes in Gone with the Wind is sort of a symbol of innocence. She's set against Scarlett O'Hara. Scarlett O'Hara doesn't have a lot of like feeling, I guess. Like, she has a lot of emotions, but she's more of a stoic, sort of realistic, pragmatic, like straightforward character, whereas Melanie is, they describe her in the novel as she never had any strength, she never had anything but heart. She's completely like emotional, she's serene, gracious, she's a symbol of innocence and just kind of like purity. And she dies in the novel because she's kind of like a purely symbolic character. And on the flip side, there are lots of novels and stories where animals are the POV characters, like Black Beauty, The Fox and the Hound. There's even a chapter in Anna Karenina where Levin's dog is the POV character, and I don't know, it's fun, it's nice. Like, I don't know, I think I would have to read the thesis, but it seems to me like she's very much getting mad about the fact that animals, which have no personhood, let's be clear about that, which don't really have personhood, are being used symbolically when I don't know how much of that influences how people view animals, I guess, if I'm being totally honest, like in a realistic, real world way. Like people who grew up reading something like Old Yeller, do they grow up and think of dogs as accessories? Not really. Oh, Babe, Pig in the City, Babe, Babe. Are you kidding? Like what was that thing that happened with Babe? Where after watching it, there was like this wave of children who wanted to go vegetarian because they saw how cute the talking pig was and they didn't want to kill the pig. I think the same thing happened with Charlotte's Web. One of the founding figures of this theory is Josephine Donovan, Professor Emerita? I don't know how to pronounce that. Whoosh. In the Department of English at the University of Maine, and the author, animals are considered commodities, and under the law they're considered property, and in science they're considered objects for laboratory experimentation. And so to the extent that literature comes to stabilize the objectification of animals, that's what animal standpoint criticism is discouraging. Condemning violence against animals in literature is one thing, but Donovan goes further, arguing that animals should not be used in fiction without regard to their point of view. Animals should not just be literary devices. So often they're just used as symbols or metaphors or in some way to comment on the state of mind of the human character, and the animal herself is discarded and then basically ignored. Donovan, whose forthcoming book is called Animals, Mind, and Matter, would like to see literature that would give the animals more voice. My overall goal is to break through this objectification and change the whole cultural notion that we see animals as living subjects who have points of view, who have minds, who have feelings, who have thoughts, who have inner worlds. I don't disagree that there should be stories where animals are the point of view character. I also just, I don't know, I find it difficult to see what the actual harm of this is, if I'm being honest. Pets are more of a friend rather than a child or property. I think definitely in our generation. I think millennials and Gen Z are starting to see animals as more companions rather than children or property. Like, obviously you get like the fur mommies or whatever on Instagram, but I think this is a total reach, if I'm being completely honest. Animals should not just be used as literary devices. Like, this idea that you shouldn't include animals in literature unless they're like a point of view character makes no sense to me, if I'm being completely honest. I don't think there's anything really wrong with animals being used symbolically. Plenty of things are used symbolically in literature, including human beings. And I think this is a very like Peta-Brained take. Do you know what I mean? Remember feeding two birds with one scone or whatever, where it's like, oh, we have to change our language use around animals. I just think this is the same kind of like brain-wormed. Oh, sorry, brain rotted kind of like terminally academic take. Animals rich as metaphors. While intrigued by certain aspects of animal standpoint theory, fellow author and dog lover Richard Telecki isn't convinced. I'm genuinely puzzled about Donovan's attitude towards the imagination, says Telecki, editor of an anthology called The Exile Book of Canadian Dog Stories. If you were too judgmental about the way writers in the past have used animals, you do a disservice both to the writer and to the past. You're going to wipe out much of Western literature. Okay, we'll see what he says going forward. I don't think that she's trying to cancel Old Yeller. Booker Prize-winning author Jan Martel also finds the animal vantage point approach restrictive. The usefulness of animals for me is precisely that they're very rich as metaphors. So this is the author of The Life of Pi, which I haven't read. The movie was kind of bad. We tend to be very cynical about our own species. We tend not to be cynical about animals, especially wild animals. We imbue animals with a sense of wonder, of marvel, and that's very useful for a storyteller because then I can take an animal character and right away get beyond your natural cynicism. As for the violence towards animals in the novels Lubensky is studying, Martels argues it can inspire empathy, adding that writing stories strictly from an animal vantage limits the imagination. Oh god, that's so based. Oh, am I gonna have to buy a copy of The Life of Pi? Stories are only useful for us. Animals don't have stories, said Martel, pointing out, for example, that telling the story of a slug from the slug's point of view serves no purpose for that creature. And it'll be quite dull for us because a slug has a very limited intellect. See, this is what I was talking about, right? Saying, I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The bird is not gonna get angry about that. The bird is not, like, there is no bird on this planet that takes umbrage with that phrase. In the same way that there is no dog on this planet that takes umbrage with the ending of Old Yeller. Like, what are we actually... Like, what... Donovan and Lubensky, I don't know what their end goal here is. If, like... Okay, telling stories about animals from animal perspectives is, like... The reason it's ridiculous is because, like Martel said, these stories aren't for the animal that we're writing about. People who read Old Yeller don't gain less sympathy for dogs. They gain more sympathy. The whole point of that novel is to get us attached to the dog and make us feel something for him. Lubensky remains committed to advocating for animals, even fictional ones. Oh god. There will always be a bit of discrepancy between the opinions of literary critics and authors, she said. I would say to authors to consider animals more fully than they are right now. It is easy to make animals ornamental in literature because they are rather ornamental in our lives already. Yeah, this is just PETA. This is just Peta-Brained. I'm sorry. This is... Like, this isn't anything. I think she's correct in saying that there is a problem with people adopting animals, specifically dogs, not knowing how to take care of them, and then discarding them when it becomes too much for them. I think she's correct on that. I think that is a serious problem that we need to address. However, this is such a PETA-brained, like, oh, even fictional animals. Like, did you guys ever see the article by PETA about Animal Crossing? Oh yeah, PETA's Vegan Guide to Animal Crossing New Horizons. Is fishing in Animal Crossing vegan? This is a biggie. Fishing isn't vegan. You shouldn't fish in real life, so you shouldn't do so in the game either. Like, what distinguishes this statement from the statement that dogs in literature should be given just as much agency as human characters? Is it okay to catch bugs in Animal Crossing? Blathers would like to build a museum of fish and insects on your island. Don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. This is the face of a killer, Bella. Fictional animals are not being harmed. I don't know how else to explain that. Like, I don't know how to put that into words that are sufficiently convincing enough. And in the same way, Old Yeller is fine. He's a fictional dog. He's not dying. He's not actually... It's not an actual, like, dog being killed. And I don't think anybody in real life is killing dogs because they read Old Yeller. Like, if you want to talk about a problem, blue tangfish, because of Finding Nemo, were in very high demand because of the fact that It was actually, like, the problem is almost the opposite, because Dory in Finding Nemo was portrayed as having an inner life, being funny, being charming, being very, like, you know, she had a big personality. Same with Clownfish, you're right. Like, and that led to an uptick of people buying these ornamental fish, and then they all died because nobody knew how to take care of them. So, like, I would use that as a counterpoint to Molly Lubensky here. You know, we've had stories where animals are center stage, where their psychology and their personalities are brought to the forefront, or even invented, because I don't think blue tangfish have personalities, unless I'm wrong. And that led to a bunch of people adopting, mistreating, and killing fish, right? Whereas, like, I don't think Old Yeller is doing the same thing for dogs. I think people... Again, I do think that it's an issue. However, I think it's not literature's fault. I don't think it's media's fault. I think it's people not being ready to take care of other living things. But I don't think this is literature's fault. I think this is a lot of, like, reaching and kind of just, like, anti-art sentiments, if I'm being totally honest. Yeah, I don't like this. I was very ready to be proven wrong in the beginning of the article, but the Old Yeller take, yeah. Well, look, I have birds on my shoulder. What do you want from me? I'm taking care of my birds. Actually, no, this is actually proving her point. These birds are purely ornamental. But yeah, I agree with a lot of the points, especially the sort of empirical ones about surrendering dogs to shelters, adopting dogs that you can't take care of. But I think that goes for anything. People, I don't think it's right. People are going to do it. We should try and mitigate that. But I don't think that writing books about dogs, by dogs, for dogs is going to change that. The article feels more like a vent rather than a research study. I don't fault the article. I think the article is actually doing quite a good job of presenting both sides. The title is like, it's good. The title brings you in. And maybe it's a thing that you agree with, maybe not. But you're getting your, you're getting in. It goes in to talk about the statistics, which is really good. We like numbers here, don't we? Designer dogs, shelters, surrenders, this and that. And then it gets into the literature. It talks about two people who have one perspective. Next, it gives us two people with a opposing perspective, and then it ends. I think this is actually a pretty good, a well-structured article. I think the vent part comes from, Josephine Donovan and Lubensky. And, there is an argument to be made about cruelty in media. I don't think that there's necessarily a need to gleefully or pornographically show violence against animals, but I don't think there's anything wrong with animals as symbols or literary devices. I think it's just a reach, like we said before. Imagine we play PETA's Pokemon game. Should I stream PETA's side scrollers? I don't think I could do that. I don't think I would do that. Not to you guys. You don't deserve that. Frankly, neither do I.